G'day everyone, just wanted to run through a quick, hopefully quick demo on how to get going with a Simple Frame app on Flutter on mobile. And in this case, I'm just going to run through the process to deploy the first template that comes with Simple Frame app. So it ends up just displaying a bit of text on screen, and I'll hopefully follow up with things that show more interesting sprites and things like that as well, but I just thought I'd do the absolute simplest thing, following the instructions. The other thing to note is that when I start a new project, I often just clone one that is very close to what I want to start with rather than start from scratch. But I think it's worth starting from scratch one time at least, just to know what's in there. It helps troubleshoot problems down the line or things like that. It's not terribly onerous anyway, but it definitely takes a few more steps than you would normally have to do. So bear with me while I do some of this stuff. I'm going to create a Flutter project from scratch, and then I'm also going to put it in version control just because that's just a workflow that I would always do anyway. So I'm just going to do that anyway. Hopefully it doesn't add too much time. And I'm going to add a few of the packages that we need to get going with this project. And then we're just going to run it in the glasses and see for ourselves how we display it. And maybe then we can change the text, display it again, something like that. But I'll try and keep it short. So to that end, I'll get going. Just I've got a webcam trained on the frames at the moment, showing one of the other apps that does the image generation. But this one is going to be just a little bit of text as well. Okay, so here we go. So I actually create Flutter projects on the command line. This is a git bash kind of terminal. I'm running on Windows. I do it so that I can set a couple of the switches that I like to do. I think in VS Code, which is what I'll use to run the code, you can create Flutter projects. There's a process for doing that. But when I had a look at it, I wasn't able to set all the switches that I wanted, so I'm just going to do it from the command line. It only takes a second. So I do a Flutter create, and then I give a description here of just my first frame app, something like that. Maybe that should be a capital. And then I'm going to say project name is going to be, I'm going to call this one my frame app. Hopefully this works okay. You can probably obviously have something better than that. And then I'm going to say empty. You can look up what all these switches do for Flutter create and see. But this one is important here. Platforms equals Android and iOS. I put that in because I try to make things work on both of these mobile platforms. And then the last one is the directory that you're going to create it in, and that is going to be my frame app. So Flutter create, bit of a description. That'll appear in a couple of the config files. That's why I put that there. The project name, which also appears in a couple of config files that it will generate, and then the platform. So it only creates folders. It doesn't create a Linux folder and a Mac OS folder and some other things that we don't need when I put the platforms there. Okay, so one of the good things about Flutter is that this is actually ready to go right now. I can run something, deploy it to my phone right now, and it will run. And I plan to do that. Why don't I do that right now? So what I'll do is I'll stop this camera and stop my app. And this way I can deploy the new app to my phone. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, so it tells me all I need to do is go into that new directory and run it, so I will. So cd my frame app flutter run. Now this is going to deploy. It might take 20 seconds or 30 seconds or something like that. As you can see, I have a Pixel 7 Pro attached to my computer on a USB cable, and so it's detected that that's the first and best option to deploy this thing onto, so it's just going to do that. But it has to go and build things first, and it actually needs to pull down some packages and things like that, I think, to do that as well. Maybe actually not too many. And it's automatically found the Android SDK that's on my machine as well, which got installed when I installed Android Studio. I'm not going to go through the process of installing Flutter and Android Studio and other things in this video. This was meant to be quick. So I've got a Hello World app running on my phone right now. I can maybe wave it in front of this. I don't want to muck up my camera, but there is a Hello World app. Let me just, yeah, so this app here, where is it? Hello World, there it is. It's running on my phone, and that's what you get for free. So it's a really basic app. So I'm going to switch that off. So that part is working. So now that I've done, you actually get a fair bit of stuff. If I look at all of the stuff you get a lot of files and all sorts of stuff as part of this Flutter project. So what I want to do is I want to check that into GitHub. So I'm going to do initialize a new repository in this directory. I'm then going to commit it. Initial Flutter create, something like that. So that way now any files that I change, I can see the changes that I make. If I didn't commit it at this point, then I wouldn't be able to see my config changes, things like that. So now might actually be a good time to create the one on GitHub to match it. So I'm just going to go in here, create a new repository called my frame app. I can copy the one here, frame app. I'm going to make it private for now, and I'm not going to create any of these things because I want to push all the contents of the repository from here, and I'm going to do it by copying this. So I'm going to paste that in there. And I'm going to push it. So I've created this blank repository online. I've now pushed the contents of this repository here, and if we click on it again, we should see that these files are now here. Okay, so now we can keep them in sync. So that's super easy, and now we've got version control, and that is a good thing if you've ever done that before. So now I've got that. I'm going to create, while I'm here, I'm going to actually just going to create a license file. That's just sort of good hygiene on GitHub as well. Now you can choose whichever license you want. I've been using the BSD 3-clause license, and that one is going to be fine with me. Now I've done a commit on the web. If I want to synchronize that locally, I'm going to have to actually pull that in. So I'm going to pull that in so we're back to in sync. And now I'm going to add the logging library. So there's a few ways. I could jump in and already get in the code, but there's a couple of commands I'm just going to do on the command line because they're easy anyway. I'm going to do flutter pub add logging because I know I'm going to need this package. It doesn't have any other configuration changes, so I'm just going to commit that one. I can see what's changed. It's just added itself to the dependencies which are in those files. Git add, git commit, added logging dependency. What else? Now I'm ready to add the Flutter Blue Plus. Now Flutter Blue Plus is a package that gives the Bluetooth low energy communication, and again, we're just going to do it this one time. Probably in the future you're just going to copy, fork or clone a repository that already does all this stuff, but it's instructive to add it one time. So let's add this one. So here I can just add it here, Flutter pub add Flutter Blue Plus. It brings in a bunch of stuff, and if you have a look at what it's done, it's so far only done this change, but we need to add, if we actually look at in pub dev, if I look for Flutter Blue Plus, it's got a home page which tells you all about what you need to do to get going with Flutter Blue Plus. Now in here, and it gives some good clues about learning about Bluetooth low energy if you haven't already. I certainly didn't know anything about it till a little while ago. But in any case, getting our project going, we need to make a few configuration changes. And you may be aware that mobile apps, if you want to use Bluetooth, then you need Bluetooth permissions, but sometimes Bluetooth gives away location, so you also need some location permissions and a few other things. And of course, particularly in Android, it changes with every iteration of the operating system, so you end up with this mess of parameters. So you're not going to type all that in yourself, but you're going to follow this script and just sort of copy them in. So that's what we're going to do now, and that I'm going to do in VS Code. So I'm going to say start VS Code in this current directory. I'll make that a bit smaller. And so here's all of our files here. So I'm going to start here with the Android one. So this is Android app build.gradle. It needs to be version 21. So this min SDK version needs to be 21, and that's because of Flutter Blue Plus. I'm just going to note that there for later. Some other packages you add occasionally want a different version as well, so it's good to keep track of it. The next one is the Android manifest. Now there's a couple of those files kicking around, but this is the one in source main. So I'm going to jump in here, and I just generally put them here. Indent that a little bit. So these are all of the Bluetooth permissions across a range of the versions of Android. Now, also, if your app is going to need internet permission, you have to add it here on Android. You don't get internet for free. You do in debug builds, which is pretty confusing because when you run a debug, it works. If you like reach out to an API like the Wikipedia API or something like that, and then it won't work when you build it in release. So remember to add internet permission for Android if you need it. I don't need find location for this. I actually just want Bluetooth. I don't want location at all, in fact. So I'm not going to do that. Android ProGuard, if you do want to avoid these kinds of build errors, then you create a file which you don't get for free, but it's in Android app ProGuard rules.pro. So I'm going to create that one, ProGuard rules.pro. Okay, save that one, that's done. And then iOS only needs these to be added. So I'm just going to go find iOS config in runner, info.plist, right at the bottom. Okay, so I've added those, and it has a default reason for needing Bluetooth, that's fine. Okay, I'm not going to add anything for macOS or anything else. So that's actually now done. So I can commit those changes. If I have a look at what's there, if I go git status, I should see I've changed a few files and added one. If I go git diff, then I can see what I've added, and that's what I expected. This is what I expected, that one there, that's all fine, the new dependency, all fine. So I'm going to just commit those. And I'm going to say added Flutter Flu plus and associated dependency associated config changes. That's fine. I can push those if I want to keep GitHub in sync. That's fine. Okay, so now I've got enough in Flutter that I could build in this app that I could start connecting to Bluetooth things, but I don't really want to write all of the Bluetooth connection code to frame by hand, so I'm going to use the simple frame app library that I've been putting some of this code in. So at this point I'm going to add it this way as well. Flutter pub add simple frame app. So this pulls in a couple of things as well, but that is the first one. And then assets. So Flutter has a convention of an assets directory, but when you ask Flutter to do a Flutter create, it doesn't create one for you automatically, so you can make one. So that's in there. And now I want to copy the template files. So the way I'm going to make this demo app is to just simply use the template files that I have in Simple Frame app. So if I could find the Simple Frame app package here. If I could type it, Simple Frame app. It's here. Now it mentions that there are these, if you look at how, there's a bit of a guide here to get going, and I mentioned some of this stuff that I'm doing right now, but the template files are located in this Simple Frame app package, so I need to go to the GitHub just to pull them up, so I can find that here, or I could have just gone to GitHub and found this project, but they're in this template directory. So I'm going to go into template directory. I want to download these files, and the way I'm going to do that, actually, just because I'm screen recording here, I'm just going to copy the contents of the file, and I'm going to overwrite the main app file. I don't need these open anymore. I'm just going to close even the Android stuff and the iOS, that can go. I'm just going to open up my main.dart. I'm just going to replace the contents of this file with this file that's in the template, and then for the frame app Lua, I need to create a new file for that. But again, I would normally just probably save as from GitHub, but I'll just do it this way here for now. Frame app.lua. So I've got a blank file there, and I'm just going to paste in the contents of this file here. So I won't talk through these just yet. there's one other thing I need to do first. That's why I don't want to talk through it yet, and that is that I need to copy. So inside of this pubspec file is a few things. It refers to the dependencies of your Flutter app and some other information about it. But in particular, you also, if your app uses assets, if there's anything that you need to be loaded to be included in the deployed package of the app, then you need to include it here so that your code inside the Flutter app can reference these items. And in this case, the way these simple frame apps run is that they deploy a bunch of Lua code onto the frame, and the code in Dart running on the phone is sending messages, and the Lua code on the frame is going to decode those messages and do something with them. Well, these are all pre-written into scripts. So I'm going to copy these over here, and you can type them all in either way. But what you'll see is that in order to copy over these little handler functions for things like batteries and the battery level and sending codes or plain text or sprites, data is more of a general one. It actually does all of the message handling and packing and unpacking of values. But and then this is the main app. This is actually the main app that we just copied that will orchestrate the whole thing on frame. These are all pretty small files, but there's a bunch of them that I'm going to send over because they each do one small thing. Anyway, so we need to add all of that. Now, like I say, really the entirety of the app is just, there's a bit of code that runs on the phone, which is going to create some messages and send them across the frame, and then there's a bit of code on the frame which is going to listen out for messages, and when it gets them, it's going to do, if it finds a piece of text, it's going to print it. If it finds a sprite, it's going to show it. If it finds a clear message, it's going to try and clear the display. And then every now and again it's going to send a battery level update. So that's all this does. So a lot of these frame side apps look about the same, and a lot of these phone side apps look the same as well, which is really that this simple frame app mix in, the whole point of it is to pull a lot of the code, the boilerplate code around connection and everything else out of this main method. And this is a bit different to most Flutter apps that try to put nothing of interest in the main.dart. I try to put everything of interest in the main.dart. So it's not conventional. Please don't follow this model for a proper app, but for a demo it's easy. You just have a run function here which is going to do what you want when the person presses on the icon, and then there's a cancel function as well. And then, as with all main Flutter apps widgets like this app, they have to have some UI that is going to be displayed, and that's just here, which is really just going to have a heading. So in this case, if we just look at what run is meant to do, it's going to send a piece of plain text that says hello frame. It's going to wait for 10 seconds, and then it's going to clear the display. Well, in fact, it's going to send a message code 10, and then the frame is going to do whatever it does when it gets a message code 10. And it turns out, if we have a look at it, that a message code 10 was saying is going to be a clear message. So if it gets a clear message, then it's going to, the way to clear display at the moment is to just try to show something on the screen and then call show, and then it will flip the back buffer and it should be clear. Although that sometimes doesn't work. But anyway, that's a separate question. And then the text message, it turns out, is that's a message code of 12. So when it gets a message code of 12 here, it's going to consider that's plain text, and it's just going to use the frame.display.text to place it there. So that's all that we expect to do. We're just going to display a bit of text, but let's see how we go. Actually, yeah, I think I'm ready to go now. So if I just click F5 within this Visual Studio Code, it's found the Pixel 7 Pro. It's going to deploy this app to it. And this will just take a moment as well. It's now building all of these new libraries that we've added as well into the package, onto the app. Okay, so that's now started on my phone. I'm just going to switch on that webcam sitting in front of the frame. Now, of course, you need to wake up a frame in order for it to be available on Bluetooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip in the nose piece like this, and then I'm going to unclip it. And what we hopefully will see is a little icon to show that it's awake. And at that moment, I'm going to click on connect. And sure enough, there we go. We've got, this is quite difficult to see. But now, so now it's just at the connected stage. And the reason why in these simple frame apps I have so many buttons on the bottom is really just because there can be so many problems with connection and so many problems with loading the Lua files on and so on that I've just broken them into separate steps. In a production app, there's absolutely no reason to do a connect and a start and then a run. You can just chain all of those together and just do it all at once. But when I'm just writing demos, I generally want to have them split just so I know what I'm doing, and I can watch the logs. As you can see here, this stuff in blue, the Flutter Blue Plus makes a lot of noise, so I tend to just exclude its lines, and so now we can watch here and see what happens. So when I press start, it's going to load all of those Lua files onto, so a bunch of them that come from the simple frame app package, but also this frame app.lua, and then it's going to send a command to say start this frame app.lua. So let's see if we can follow that in the log. I press start, and as you see, when it runs, it's actually doing a few other things. I'm actually tracking the memory, available memory, or sorry, this is actually the used memory in Lua as I load things on there, because you load enough stuff on there, it's going to run out of memory. So that was a bit of leftover from when I was doing a bit of that. But you can see that it's got, it's loaded each of these files over, and so now they're ready to go. And then right at the end, it's got this require command. And in Lua, when you require the name of a Lua file, it starts it up. And you can also, so you might notice that these ones are minified. You can also minify this main one, but if it's the file you're working on, then you don't want to keep changing it and then minifying it and so on. So I leave that one generally till last. But the standard library ones, you can just pull in the minified version. All right, so now I've got a button, an icon in the bottom right hand corner on my phone, so I can run it, and let's see, hopefully we'll see some text. Oh, there we go. Hello friend, hello frame, that's what it says. Okay, so that, and it should go for 10 seconds, and then after 10 seconds something will happen. Either it will clear or it will do that little, where it's just remove the little top corner. That's where I have my little space message. You'll see that actually when I wanted to do a clear, I actually only set a space, and that seems to not be enough now to get it to really clear the buffer. It just overwrites a hello frame with a space. So that's not a very good clear function anymore. I need a more reliable way of clearing the display actually. But generally, if you do a bit of drawing and then you do a show, and then you do a bit more drawing, then the stuff in the buffer from before should be gone. And it used to work, and sometimes it does, but I'm not quite sure why that's not working this time. But either way, we now have displayed some text on there, which is really all this template was meant to do. Now, in here, where we have the main function, we can go ahead and start hacking away in here and doing other things, not just sending plain text, but sending sprites or sending other things as well. And it should only really be in this run method. And then whenever you press the icon, so I can press the icon again, and I get my message again, and then 10 seconds later it goes away. I can change this number to be something else, 2 seconds, and I can change the text to say, that's all. And I probably shouldn't use a single quote. Yep, okay. Now I think plain text, I think I might have added color to it as well. So I probably can, no, I didn't add color yet. Okay, I put some position things in there. So at the moment you can't color text directly. Although actually I could do it in the Lua, but what's great about Flutter actually and Dart is that it updates live on the device. So this code, if I change it to be 2 seconds, and then maybe I just don't even clear it at all, well actually then that doesn't really do anything, does it? So when I save it, it actually updates the code on here. Now if it's really initialization code, then it might not run again, but this code will run again. The run function runs every time I press this icon, so if I run it again, then it should say that's all folks. And then 2 seconds later, we get the T disappears. If I wanted to change the Lua, and I might as well do this one time, then what happens is I do need to restart the app in order to redeploy this Lua. This Lua won't hot deploy onto the frame. So if I did want to change something here, so for example, I can, what would be something sensible to do here? If when I get this text, instead of writing the text that you send me, why don't I just write something else entirely? And so this will be a surprise. So now this is not expected behavior, but when I send a plain text message with some text in it, that's actually not what's going to be printed. It's going to print something else. And so I'm really using it just like a code where I'm just sending, hey, now do the thing that you do when you get this code 12. Well, anyway, this is a bit of a strange sort of test, but either way, like I say, if I try to run that right now, if I save it and if I press run, it's not going to have updated that because the Lua code hasn't updated. But instead, if I do a stop and a disconnect, I try to do a clean disconnect, otherwise it sometimes gets confused, and then I close that app, then we'll see inside of Visual Studio Code here, it knows that that app is stopped. I'm going to start it again, and now when I do, actually, you know what, I probably could have just done a start. I'm not certain actually if I could have just done another start and it would have sent that Lua code, or whether I really need to rebuild the package for it to include that asset with its changed code in there. That would be a good thing to know actually. But now that's just starting right now. Now the frames will have timed out after being disconnected, so I can't just click connect. I've got to tap them again. It's enough just to tap them, but I just didn't want to bump it out of alignment too much. There we go. So that's woken up. So I click connect, and it's paired. If I go to start, then it normally shows loading, and then it when all those Lua files are over there, then it stops. And now if I do run, it says something else entirely. So that's showing a change to the Lua code. So basically, when I'm making an app, some of the things are going to happen in the Dart code, which I'm mostly doing, inside of the main.dart, and then sometimes things are going to be done on the Lua side, and then you're going to make changes in frame app. And you can make both sides of it modular, but I'm trying to keep all the apps so simple that they really only have one file where it's easy to find everything that's happening. Anyway, that's the very quick version of getting a new Flutter app created, deployed. I suppose one thing out of hygiene I should do is I should check, have I changed files? Yes, I have. If I have a look at what those changes are, I have replaced this main file, so it's going to look very different. And then here I've added different dependencies, and I've importantly remembered to add assets, which are the standard Lua files that I'm going to include in my frame side app, and then the frame app itself. And that's all the changes. So I'm just going to commit those. Implemented migrate app, and then I'm just going to push that, and that's ready to go. So I'm ready to release. I'm not going to show how to do a release within GitHub right now, but either way, this is now, that's simple frame app. This is my frame app. And I could add a README and a few other things, but now you'll see that all my changes are in here as well. So now I've got a Flutter app that I can deploy to my phone. I can follow the logs when it's running, so I can debug it, and I can test it in the frame itself with a very simple sending plain text. Now, it might seem like that's a lot of work to get a bit of plain text displayed, and I would agree that's the case. Going forward, if you wanted to start a new app, you could of course just clone or fork or something a repository that's already got some of these config changes in it, and I do that sometimes if there's an app that's very similar to one that I've already done, and then I just got to remember to change things like app names and whatever, because that can be a bit fiddly. Sometimes it's easier to just create a new one. And it gets pretty quick to put some of these config changes in after you've done it a few times. But yeah, you don't have to do it every time. You can always just copy one. That's also fine. And then put more interesting things in. And of course, you can copy more interesting sample apps as well, because there are plenty that use the camera or track, the IMU on the frame and things like that. Anyway, that's it for now. I hope it was helpful. Please ask any questions, and there's a bunch of things I didn't do, like install Flutter or install Android Studio or anything like that, and I didn't want to put them in these. If there are things that people really need to understand how to do, you can ask about them. There might be better videos than any that I could produce about doing those things, but this is really the frame bit that I was going to demonstrate today. Anyway, enjoy your coding.